There's a question that doesn't get asked often enough. Not because it's unimportant, because the answer might require rethinking what technology is. If you discovered a device from a civilization thousands of years more advanced than ours, would you recognize it as technology? Would it have buttons, screens, circuits, or would it appear inert, unresponsive, waiting for something you don't have? Not power, not knowledge, something biological. Communication across interstellar distances has always been treated as an engineering problem. Build bigger transmitters, use more power, aim precisely, wait decades for a response. This assumes the other side is also using electromagnetic radiation, radio waves, lasers, something that propagates through space at the speed of light. But that assumption has limits. Light is fast, but space is vast. A signal sent to the nearest star takes over 4 years to arrive. A signal from across the galaxy takes tens of thousands. For a civilization attempting real-time interaction across those distances, electromagnetic communication isn't just slow, it's impractical. So what's the alternative? One possibility has been quietly explored for decades, not by fringe researchers, but by military and intelligence agencies. The idea that consciousness itself might function as a signaling mechanism, not metaphorically, not spiritually, as an actual transmission medium. In the 1970s, the CIA initiated a program called Stargate. The goal was simple: determine if human consciousness could access information at a distance without physical proximity. Remote viewing. The methodology was structured. Coordinates were provided. Targets were obscured. Viewers attempted to describe locations they had never seen, sometimes thousands of miles away. The results were inconsistent, but not random. Certain participants demonstrated accuracy rates that exceeded statistical noise. Not perfectly, but reliably enough that the program continued for over 2 decades. It wasn't abandoned because it failed. It was declassified because the Cold War ended and priorities shifted. But the core question remained unanswered. If consciousness can access spatially distant information without a known transmission medium, what mechanism is being used? No electromagnetic signal was detected, no particle exchange, no energy transfer that conventional instruments could measure. Yet the effect persisted. This suggests one of 2 things. Either the phenomenon doesn't exist and the results are artifacts of flawed methodology, or consciousness operates through a channel we don't yet have instruments to detect. Both possibilities have implications, but only one has been systematically ignored. Consider the human brain. 86 billion neurons, each one connected to thousands of others, firing in coordinated patterns that generate coherent thought, memory, perception. The brain isn't just processing information, it's maintaining coherence across billions of simultaneous events. Neurons synchronize, oscillate together, create standing waves of electrical activity that span entire regions. This coherence is measurable. We call it neural synchrony. And it's not incidental. Coherence appears to be necessary for conscious experience. When neural networks fall out of sync, consciousness fragments. Anesthesia works in part by disrupting this coherence. Now consider what coherence means in signal processing. A coherent signal has phase alignment. All parts of the wave move together. This makes it distinguishable from noise. Incoherent signals are random. They cancel themselves out. They don't transmit information efficiently. Biological systems naturally generate coherence. Machines do not without significant engineering. If communication across non-local space requires extreme coherence, phase-locked patterns, stable across vast distances, then biological systems might have an inherent advantage, not because they're mystical, because they're already optimized for maintaining coherence under noisy conditions. There's a protocol that's been practiced independently by multiple groups over the past several decades. It's called CE5, close encounters of the fifth kind. The framework is straightforward. A group assembles. They synchronize their attention. They project a coherent intention, usually a desire for contact or communication, and then they wait. The reported results are strikingly consistent across independent groups. Anomalous lights appearing in response to the signaling. Objects moving in patterns that correlate with the group's focus. Timing that suggests responsiveness rather than coincidence. This could be entirely psychological. Pattern recognition applied to random sky phenomena. But the consistency is unusual. Different groups, different locations, different years, similar reports. If this were purely cognitive bias, you'd expect more variation, different interpretations, different perceived responses. Instead, the reports converge on specific patterns. Lights appearing within minutes of focused intention. Movement that seems directional, responsive. Silence afterward, unless the protocol is repeated. What's interesting isn't whether this proves contact, it's that the framework treats consciousness as a signaling mechanism. Intentional, directional, coherent. And multiple independent operators report that it produces consistent effects. That's worth examining, not as proof, as data. There's a concept emerging at the edges of both neuroscience and engineering. Consciousness-assisted technology, CAT. The idea is simple: technology that requires biological coherence to function. Not voice commands, not gesture control. Direct interfacing with neural states. We already have primitive versions of this. Brain-computer interfaces that allow paralyzed patients to control prosthetics with thought. Neural implants that decode intended movement from motor cortex activity. These systems work because the brain generates detectable patterns. Intentions have signatures. Now scale that up. Imagine a propulsion system that doesn't respond to switches or throttles. It responds to intentional states. Destination locking through sustained neural coherence. You don't pilot it in the conventional sense. You align with it. This sounds speculative, but it appears repeatedly in testimony from individuals who claim close-range encounters with unidentified craft. The controls didn't have buttons. They responded to thought, not spoken commands. Direct intent. Movement correlated with mental focus. Destination selection happened through visualization, not input. If true, this isn't telepathy. It's interface design, a system engineered to read and respond to coherent biological signals. Why would a civilization build technology this way? Because it solves the latency problem. Conventional control systems require physical input, button presses, lever movements, signal transmission through wires or wireless protocols. Every step introduces delay at relativistic speeds or across interstellar distances. Those delays become prohibitive, but if the craft is directly interfaced with the operator's neural state, the response is instantaneous. No latency, no misinterpretation, no control lag, just coherence between intention and action. The reverse is also possible. Technology-assisted consciousness, TAC. Devices designed not to be controlled by consciousness, but to amplify it, stabilize it, tune it. Think of it as signal conditioning for biological coherence. The brain is noisy, thoughts drift, attention fragments, neural coherence fluctuates constantly under normal conditions. But what if a device could externally stabilize that coherence? Maintain phase lock across neural networks, suppress noise, amplify signal. This would make the brain a far more effective transmitter or receiver. There are reports, scattered, unverified, but consistent, of individuals describing devices encountered during close-range UAP experiences. Devices that, when worn or held, produced altered states of consciousness, not intoxication, not disorientation, clarity, expanded perception, access to information that shouldn't have been available. These descriptions align with what you'd expect from a TAC system, a device that optimizes the user's neural state for interfacing with non-electromagnetic signaling channels. Again, this is speculative, but it's consistent, and it suggests something important. If advanced civilizations use consciousness as part of their technological infrastructure, then the distinction between biology and machinery becomes irrelevant. They're integrated. The technology doesn't work without the operator. The operator can't access the full bandwidth without the technology. It's a symbiosis. Electromagnetic radiation has bandwidth limits. You can encode information in frequency, amplitude, phase. You can compress data, use error correction, optimize transmission. But you're still bound by the speed of light and by inverse square law. Signal strength drops with distance. For long-range communication, you need enormous power or enormous patience. But there are other frameworks. Quantum entanglement allows correlation between particles regardless of distance. No signal propagates, no energy transfers, but the correlation exists. Currently, we can't use this for communication because the correlation doesn't allow information transfer in the classical sense. But that's a limitation of our current understanding, not necessarily a fundamental constraint. There are also field-based models. Coherence maintained across non-local space through resonance rather than signal propagation. Two systems vibrating in phase, not because one is transmitting to the other, but because they're coupled to the same underlying field. This is how certain quantum systems behave. It's also how some biological systems synchronize. Fireflies flashing in unison, neurons firing in coordinated waves, no central controller, no transmitted signal, just phase locking across a shared substrate. If consciousness operates similarly, if coherent neural states can couple to a non-local field, then communication across distance becomes possible without signal delay, not faster than light. Outside the framework where speed matters, most interstellar travel concepts assume reaction-based propulsion. Eject mass, generate thrust, accelerate. This requires enormous energy, produces enormous waste heat, takes decades or centuries even at high speeds. But there's another model that appears in both speculative physics and recurring testimony: intent-driven navigation. Not propulsion in the conventional sense. Selection. You don't travel to a destination, you align with it. This sounds impossible, but it's consistent with certain interpretations of quantum mechanics. Observation collapses probability. The act of measurement selects one outcome from many possible states. If consciousness can interface with quantum-scale processes, if coherent biological intent can influence wave function collapse, then navigation becomes a selection problem rather than a propulsion problem. You don't move through space. You select the branch of reality where you're already at the destination. This is deeply speculative, but it aligns with testimony from individuals who claim interaction with non-human operated craft. The movement wasn't mechanical. It was instantaneous, non-inertial, as if the craft didn't accelerate to the new position. It was simply there. And the operator's role wasn't to pilot. It was to hold the destination in coherent focus, to stabilize intent long enough for the transition to complete. If this mechanism exists, it explains several things. Why UAP move without visible propulsion. Why they don't produce sonic booms despite hypersonic speeds. Why occupants report no sensation of acceleration. Because there is no acceleration. Just transition. Here's the uncomfortable possibility. If consciousness is the primary interface for advanced technology, then much of that technology might already be here. Inert, inactive, unresponsive, not broken, waiting. Waiting for an operator with the correct biological configuration, the correct coherence, the correct intent. You could study such a device for decades and learn nothing. Disassemble it. Analyze its materials, map its structure, all of it meaningless if the device requires a living operator to function. This is consistent with some accounts from alleged retrieval programs. Technology that appears functional but doesn't respond to any conventional input. No power source, no control interface, no reaction to electromagnetic fields, completely inert, unless someone with the right neural state is present. Then it activates. Not because of proximity, because of coherence. This creates a profound problem. If the technology requires consciousness to operate, and we don't understand how consciousness interfaces with it, then we can't reverse engineer it. We can study the hardware. But the hardware is only half the system. The other half is biological. And we don't yet know how to replicate that. None of this is certain. It's a framework, a model, an attempt to reconcile patterns that appear across independent sources. Historical remote viewing programs that produced results inconsistent with chance. CE5 protocols that multiple groups report as effective. UAP testimony describing thought-based control systems. Accounts of devices that amplify perception or stabilize consciousness. All of it circumstantial, none of it conclusive. But the pattern is consistent. If you assume consciousness can function as a technological substrate, not mystically, but as an actual signaling and interfacing mechanism, then much of what seems impossible becomes merely unproven. Communication without electromagnetic delay, navigation without conventional propulsion, technology that only activates in the presence of coherent biological intent. These aren't violations of physics. They're extensions of frameworks we're only beginning to explore. Quantum coherence in biological systems, non-local correlation, field-based signaling. All of these are active areas of research, and all of them suggest that consciousness might be more than an emergent property of neural activity. It might be a functional interface, a bridge between biology and systems we don't yet recognize as technology. If that's true, then the devices we're searching for may already exist, not hidden, just inactive, waiting for the one thing we haven't yet learned to provide. Not power, not knowledge, coherence. The question isn't whether the technology is real. The question is whether we're ready to operate it.